things to help make this possible. The City of Anacortes Lodging Tax Fund, the City of Anacortes and the Anacortes Arts Commission have been fantastic to work with. They believed in this fest from the first time I started talking about it, which is unusual, but it was a good feeling. And they were incredible. They've been incredible here. Arts Washington, Ian Boyd has helped make this happen with his support for the Samthology and his design of the cover of the Samthology, which will be launched tonight. Copper Canyon Press, which of course Sam Hamill founded many years ago, and they were here on Thursday night and had books. Martina Espada for the Samthology, the Fidalgo Culture Foundation, Knox Gardner and Victor Chudnovsky, Marius Hibbard, How It Works, Chris Terrell has been amazing. He printed the posters and the gold passes and also the bookmarks. Humanities Washington, Middle Point Press, Kim Miller for support of the Samthology. Thank you, Ian. Pleasure Boat Studio, Poets and Writers, Stanley and Risha Saber, the Subud International Cultural Association. Without Subud, this event would not have happened because it was a Subud person who helped start this off and get us connected here at Anacortes, and other Subud people working the door today. So thank you very much. And the Splat Board and key volunteers who we recognized last night. So today the first of two panels is Cascadia Zen. I will turn it over to the woman who closed our first reading last night in a brilliant way, the launch of Mega True Means Medo Sadio. Please, a warm hand for the panel, including Shin Pai.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our panel on Sam Hamill and Zen. There are many ways to approach the philosophy and practice of Zen, and in this particular panel, we decided to take the approach of Zen as radical honesty. While we acknowledge that the intention of the Poetry Festival this weekend is to commemorate and remember a teacher, mentor, and friend to many, we also acknowledge that Sam Hamill was a human who embodied inconsistencies and complexities which we have been left to tease and puzzle our way through. The two of our panelists today, Thomas Hitoshi, Pruiksma, and Courtney Hudak, represent writers who were mentored by Sam, who come into their own as unique voices with deep awareness of their own creative sensibilities and personal politics. From each of them, you'll hear about their connection to Sam, the discipline they were offered, and what they had to rebel against in order to evolve into the artists and individuals that they needed to be. Dr. Jason Wirth will give general commentary on themes connected to Zen and Sam's work, and we'll follow short talks by each of our panelists with an open question and answer session. So our first presenter this morning is Thomas Hitoshi Pruiksma, who is an author, poet, translator, teacher, musician, and lover of life. He was born in Seattle and has worked in South India and Southern Mexico, and is a 2018-2019 NEA Translation Fellow. Earlier this year, Maristone Press published Thomas's first collection of poems, The Safety of Edges. Other books include Give, Eat, and Live, poems of Abayar and Body and Earth, with the artist C.F. John. He makes his home on Vashon Island with his partner, David.
Thank you. I met Sam in Cascadia in 2005. Vancouver, BC, where I was interloping at a large academic writing conference that was filled with angst and a few glimmers of light. Through the good graces and auspices of Steve Cusey's I delivered a few of my translations of the 12th century Tamil woman, poet, and saint Abbayar to Sam, who liked the translations and invited me to lunch. And that began 13 years of gathering, sometimes Port Townsend, sometimes in Seattle, sometimes in Anacortes, sometimes more far-flung and exotic locations such as Columbus, Ohio. And over those years, I came to think that I actually was friends with two Sams, or two aspects of this sometimes astonishingly complicated figure. There was Sam the poet and translator, in whom the intellect could dance among the words. And there is also Sam Hamill, the suffering human being, who could be as cruel as he was kind, and as ungiving as he was generous, as can all of us, in our own measure. I remember sometimes visiting Sam and feeling, as we were talking, that I was hanging out with Sam Hamill, the guy, and out of nowhere, apparently, Sam Hamill, the poet, would emerge and I would recognize the voice that I knew from his poems. But this weekend, as I've been thinking about it, I've thought it's equally true that Sam Hamill, the man, existed within Sam Hamill. That there was a very interesting and interconnected relationship between what I'm calling two aspects of this poet. And that's part of the mystery of who Sam was and is to me. And it's the mystery of that mystery I most want to honor today. I prepared a couple notes. I spent the last 3 months rereading all of Sam's poems and thinking about this phrase, Cascadia Zen. So what I have to offer are merely some poets' dottings in hopes that they may illuminate something or other. One's own good nature. The heart of what I want to say is very simple. Poems of a certain kind can occasion transformation, both in their poet and in their listener, reader, speaker, and singer. Similarly, Buddhist practice, Zen practice, can occasion transformation. It can foster deep healing and transformation of suffering, which is also transformation of the world. For Sam Hamill, the practice of poetry and the practice of Zen were intertwined almost to the point of being one. And because he came to dwell and practice in Cascadia, is of, as he says, Cascadia. We could equally call this poetry and his practice Cascadian Zen. At the same time, such a name may obscure as much as it reveals, as all names both obscure and reveal. This is particularly true of Sam's practice, because he not only went to school on the old Buddhist poets, but also on Confucius and Lao Tzu. He moves easily through the three ways, Sanjiao, of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Like Confucius, he sought utter clarity and precision with words. Like Lao Tzu, he knew that no name can name the unnameable. And like the Buddha, he knew that hanging on to ideas, even Buddhist ideas, can bring suffering. And so, following the Diamond Sutra, the diamond that cuts through illusion, we might say, what we may call Cascadian Zen is not in fact Cascadian Zen. That is why it is truly Cascadian Zen. Such paradox serves to return us to practice. And among the gifts of Sam's poems are clear pointers for practice. My favorite is the Ars Poetica that opens his book Gratitude, in which he speaks of the poem which, quote, for one brief moment or an hour reveals the tragic human spirit in the very act of imagining itself cured of the sickness of self. That is, to me, the key starting point, our ill-conceived sense of self. As Sam says in another poem, I must empty myself of self before I can see even the simplest of ideas. Or as he says in a poem to Hayden Carruth, all wars begin at home, within the warring self. No, our poems cannot stop a war, not this nor any war, but the one that rages from within, which is the first and only step. And the way one takes that step, Sam's answer appears in that same Ars Poetica, in Gratitude. All the suffering of this world can be truly felt, absorbed, and transcended just by the act of listening to that deepest voice speaking from within. In a sense, there's nothing more to say. All we have to do is listen. All we have to do is offer attention. When I began my own stumbling attempts at meditation, Sam said to me, nothing like beginning the day with a little clarity. And yet, as Sam himself has done in poem after poem, we can foster that clarity by continuing to listen. It is the continuing, the long practice that transforms. Of course, one may ask what kind of transformation this is. Here I found a lesser-known book by Thich Nhat Hanh, transformation at the base, 50 verses on the nature of consciousness to offer its own clarity. At the base of our consciousness is what Thich Nhat Hanh calls store consciousness. Everything we experience, perceptions, feelings, thoughts, our sense of self, exists first as seeds in this deepest layer of our mind, which stores them, hence the name. These seeds can be dormant, in which case we don't consciously experience them, or they can grow and manifest in our experience and in the world. We may carry, for instance, a seed of anger or rage, though most of the time it might be sleeping and hidden. But given the right conditions within and without, it can erupt into waking life, bringing with it its own energy and dynamics. And the same is true for a seed of compassion, or attentiveness, or peace. It's by bringing mindful attention to what grows from these seeds that these manifestations, or more technically, mental formations, are transformed. This is why Thich Nhat Hanh speaks of the miracle of mindfulness. As he puts it in the 45th verse of his 50, when sunlight shines, it helps all vegetation grow. When mindfulness shines, it transforms all mental formations. As a person's practice deepens, this transformation can reach all the way down to store consciousness, where the seeds themselves are transformed. Then we have transformation at the base. And since our store consciousness is not merely our own, but shared and collective, transformation at the base is also transformation of our shared experience. It transforms the entire cosmos. As Sam says in the Pisen Canto, what's at stake is merely everything, including what we call Cascadia, or perhaps we should say the practice of Cascadia, which is simply the practice of being where we are and being centered where we are, which of course is both simple and not simple at all, and simple because it is not simple. No place is special, says Sam in the Pisen Canto, except we make it so, through myth or attitude. And this happens, Sam continues, in ordinary words, quote, ordinary words that lead lives into transformation every day, or can lead lives into hell and do every day. What matters then in the practice of poetry and life is the quality of our attention. That's what transforms within and without, and allows the possibility of paradise, made, as Sam liked to say, quoting Elites, of the same material as hell. Once more, a Pisen Canto. Nor is paradise artificial, but is one's own good nature. Here's one more way to put it. At the end of Edible Earth, Sam writes, our prayers will not be answered by some future heaven, but by what's planted in our hearts already. The practice of poetry, like the practice of Zen, offers the possibility that what is planted in our hearts already, in the deepest layer of our consciousness, may grow and flourish and be present in the world. As Thich Nhat Hanh puts it, we can create paradise or hell in our own minds. And because what seems to be in our minds also shapes what seems to be beyond our minds, we are again at the first and only step. And if this seems paradoxical, that's because it is paradoxical. Only paradox can approach what lies at the edge of words and makes even the most ordinary and common experience numinous. As Sam wrote in the poem for Morris Graves, the dance of the intellect, the dance of wild imagination, illuminates what cannot otherwise be known, a koan, one's rational and irrational mind at one. The last time I saw Sam, after I helped mow the backyard, which was preceded by taking all of Tara's poop from the backyard so that the mowing could be done properly. We happened to sit on the couch and watch a documentary about Eiji, Dogen's monastery, where Sam had spent a few days during his and Gray's year in Japan. As the program finished, he suddenly turned to me and said, 55 years of practice. Same death as everyone else. That too is a koan. That too is a pointer for practice. So what is Cascadian Zen? Cascadian Zen, we might say, is not simply Zen practice in Cascadia, transformation in Cascadia, but also the practice of Cascadia, the transformation of Cascadia. The healing and transformation of Cascadia is the healing and transformation of our own hearts. As Sam once said in a poem to Adrian Rich, I dreamed you were a poem, you wrote a lover. And I often think you too are a long poem whose gift is the gift of change, of sublime transformation. And what is Cascadia but a realm of transformation? The clear waters of earth and sky cascading through time, offering what they offer to all of us. Here is the Cascadian paradox. The center of the cosmos is everywhere, but we can know it in our bones, only right here, only in this center where we are in this moment, noticing but unswayed by those who proclaim the real centers, or so-called centers of power, out there somewhere. Out there is nowhere. That is Cascadian Zen. Thank you.
Our next presenter is Courtney Hudak. Courtney is a poet, lawyer, and third-generation single mother. Her writing is eclectic and fittingly has appeared in a diversity of places, including the Seattle Review of Books, The Ghosts of Seattle Past, Anthology, which was a finalist for the 2018 Washington State Book Award, and at DesignSponge.com, as well as Super Lawyers magazine. As an attorney, Courtney represents people seeking asylum in the United States on a pro bono basis. Sam Hamill was her teacher in poetry, Zen, and activism for just over a decade.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for being here. Thank you. We didn't chat before we arrived here. I didn't know what Tom was going to say, and it's delightful. Tom and I were Sam's students for approximately the same amount of time. I really appreciate what you brought today. I'm going to talk about the student-teacher relationship, Zen, poetry, and activism. Only. It's okay, it's okay. As a way of placing my own Zen practice, I decided not to get an abortion during a week-long silent Zen writing retreat held on Cortez Island in British Columbia. Several months later, I became a single mother, and not long after that, I met Sam Hamill. I was studying philosophy at Seattle University, and my poetry teacher there encouraged what were then the opening throes of my love affair with writing poetry. Though I'd grown up memorizing Jack Pilatsky, and I'd spent my teens and early 20s carrying the poetry of Gertrude Stein and Dorothy Parker everywhere I went, I was used to writing poems. My Seattle U teacher told me, go to all the readings, and the festivals, and the events. Volunteer, he said. And so I volunteered at the first Poets in the Park event in Redmond, Washington. Thank you. That's where I met Sam. He seemed when I met him like my kind of radical. He recently turned down an invitation to the White House from Laura Bush, not merely by saying no, but by organizing thousands of poets to write and speak out against the Bush White House's warmongering. At Poets in the Park, he spoke plainly and forcefully. As he'd eventually tell me, many times, Sam tended to repeat, radical means root. I liked the way Sam seemed to get at the roots of things, without appearing to care whether he made people uncomfortable. After his reading at Poets in the Park, I approached Sam to ask what a new poet should be reading. By the time I reached him, a small crowd had formed. Sam's wife, Gray, saw me hovering at the periphery. She took my hand and drew me in. I asked Sam my question, and he was polite but dismissive. He listed a few titles and quickly returned his attention to the crowd. Gray, still holding my hand, apparently thought more encouraging was in order. She gave me Sam's email address. Write to him, she said. He'll write back. So I did, and he did. And we spent a few months emailing back and forth. Sam, then the director of the Port Townsend Writers Conference, encouraged me to attend. And when I explained about the single mother thing, he encouraged me to apply for a scholarship. Shortly after my scholarship was granted, Sam was fired as the conference's director. I was ignorant of all the history and politics involved in his firing. The only thing I knew for sure was that the man I was going there to see would no longer be involved. I emailed him and a conference coordinator to say I would no longer be attending. Sam quickly emailed us both back, telling the coordinator, yes, Courtney is coming, and telling me, as my poetry teacher at SU had, to do everything. This was an opportunity, Sam said, and I shouldn't waste it. He also told me he'd be around at Fort Worden in his office at Copper Canyon. Drop by, he said, we'll catch up. That conference was the first time I ever left my daughter. I made complex arrangements for her to stay with a variety of friends and family and headed out to Port Townsend. It was a weird week. Among other things, I learned that workshops and poets can be truly strange and fascinating. Every day at lunch, I stopped in at Copper Canyon. I'd read all the books Sam told me to, and I had questions. The first day I went, Sam wasn't there. Would you like to leave him a note? Sure. The second day, he wasn't there, nor the third. On the fourth day, I told the nice Copper Canyon people I was just there to leave Sam another note, but they said, oh, but he's here. And in that moment, I was terrified. No longer brand new to the local poetry world, and having had a few days to hear some of the gossip about the history and politics around Sam's firing from the conference, I'd been introduced to his reputation for being difficult. Plus, figuring he wouldn't be in any way, I left my notebook of questions for Sam in my room. I reluctantly tiptoed to his office door. Sam sat behind a heavy wooden desk in a slant-lit room with dusty windows surrounded by stacks and stacks and shelves and shelves and piles of books. He invited me in and gestured toward a chair surrounded by books. I probably cleared my throat and then told him I'd read everything he'd suggested, but I had questions. But the problem was I left my notebook with the questions in my room. Sam said, fine. Sam said, we'll just sit until you remember your questions. So we sat, silently, for a long time. Eventually, my gaze focused on some of the spines of all those books. As the titles came into focus, I remembered some of the book's contents, and I recalled my questions. Sam and I spoke that day for a long time. I recently found the journal, and here's what I wrote after that conversation. It was July 21st, 2004. Sam sat and talked with me for just about 2 hours yesterday. I'm still a little dazed. He said, loneliness is good. He said, poetry is practice. He says, after spending 40-some years working on poetry for 3 to 5 hours every day, he probably knows more about poetry than anyone. He says, every solitude is individual. He says, if you haven't read 25 books of poetry, then you might as well get out. He says, philosophers try to understand order, and poets try to impose it. He talked about Confucius and giving things their right names. He says it took him years to choose Zen. He says when we really consider what we need, we find it's not much. He says, Liam Lee is kind of an ass, but Jim Harrison's cool. He called Aaron Blue a live wire. He says books and koans are useful, but it's really about sitting. He said his Zen name is either Honorable Fool or Big Fool, depending on how you translate. He says immediate gratification is the problem. He said the problem with MFA programs isn't the idea, it's the organization. Then he told me maybe graduate education would be a good idea for me and Ava. Ava's my daughter. He said we should learn poetry like musicians learn jazz, by learning the master's licks and going from there. He said, remember when you learned your first chord, and then you learned your second, and how hard it was to go between them? That's like being a new poet. He said even a child can write one good poem, but to write 2 or 3, well, that takes a lifetime's worth of practice. He said someone once told him a good poet should write for 3 intelligent people, and that every good poet worth her salt has 2 smart friends, so she spends her whole life looking for her 3rd reader. He said he'd like to edit an anthology of obscure and brilliant poets and call it the 3rd reader. He said Rexroth was just one of his guys, and Socrates was too. Over the next decade or so, everything Sam and I talked about turned out to be rooted in that first conversation. I began making regular pilgrimages to Port Townsend. Our practices were twofold. The regular practice, sake, then wine, and or tequila, long arguments about poetry, Zen, and philosophy that inevitably devolved as the night progressed to George Jones' plated unreasonable volume. These were requisite, each and every time. Our more periodic practices, perhaps a little like Shin, varied. I assisted with his work for Poets Against the War. I packed his books, like Tommy did, when he sold his library to Ohio State. When he left Copper Canyon and built a building to hold his press, I stood in that cold little building for hours, putting away type that Sam and Tree had set the year I was born. Later, when Sam and Gray moved to Anacortes, I helped Gray when she was ill, and I helped Sam after Gray died. Sam directed me on the gathering of papers and publications for the biography. He was never sure whether I should write, or more likely it needed to be someone more famous. In any case, I was to have things gathered and ready. When Sam decided to publish his collected poems, I typed several of his books, which at the time existed only in print, into a computer. I went to Sam's readings. I read his books. I drank his sake, and I asked him thousands and thousands of questions. Sam was my friend, my teacher, and my mentor. And when he asked me to go to Argentina, I said no. A debate ensued. He and Gray had wanted to retire there, and he just wanted to return once more, and he would hire me as his assistant, and could I just grant an old man this one wish? He was annoyingly unrelenting. By this time I was married and an unemployed lawyer, and my family and everyone else I knew said, why not? So I relented. And Argentina is where Sam gave me my koan. More than a decade after our first meeting, I spent 6 weeks in Buenos Aires being subjected to Sam's molestations and cruelty. For 6 weeks, I could not walk through a doorway or hall without him pawing at or grabbing me. I could not sit near him without him attempting to play footsie. He behaved this way without shame in front of other men, who took it as permission to treat me similarly. The Argentines I was subjected to blamed it on sangre caliente when they grabbed at and kissed me. When I asked them to stop, they told me I was too sensitive. They said I was overreacting. Sam laughed and called me a prude. Can you believe her husband let her come here with me? He asked his colleagues. So I found ways to hide. During one restaurant dinner, I hid in a bathroom for a while. On my way back to the table, I fell down a narrow flight of concrete stairs. In the small restaurant, at the early for Buenos Aires hour that we ate, the whole staff collected over my crumpled body and tended to me before gently herding me back to the table. Crying and pleading, I told Sam I wanted to go back to the apartment where we were staying. He looked me over. He picked up the half-finished bottle of Malbec. He poured himself a full glass and said, "Not till I finish my wine." Throughout my years as Sam's student, people had raised eyebrows. My first poetry teacher, he warned me, Other poets made suggestive comments, Sam's friends asked questions, and various outsiders expressed condescending concern. For more than a decade, I knew, like I knew the sight of my own face, that these people were wrong. Sam would never hurt me, except that he would, and he did. In the first pages of Barry Majid's book about the psychology of Zen koans, Nothing is Hidden, Majid describes his own Zen teacher, Ido Shinano, as having had a mixture of charisma, insight, and sexual misconduct that provided a whole generation of American Zen students their first koan. I read this and was grateful for the reminder that I am not the only one. I'm here today because I am not the only one. And yet we, poets, students, Zen practitioners, do not prefer to talk about these things. It's uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable. I wasn't sure I wanted to be here today, but I got to thinking. One of Sam's favorite poets was George Ferris, and one of his favorite lines was from a poem called An Old Man on a Riverbank, in which Ferris wrote, "I want no more than to speak simply, to be granted that grace." Sam quotes that line in a poem of his own called Sisyphus. I particularly like the last two stanzas of that poem, which I'll read. Chuangzi's fisherman brought Confucius to his knees. To follow the way, he says with a sly grin, is to finally reach completion, which is not an end, but a means. Sisyphean tasks, like lost causes, are the only ones worthwhile. And then the robin sings. I was Sam's student, and I hope that I have learned from him well. I'm here today to speak simply and to honor my teacher in the radical way that I think, at his best, he would have expected. Thank you.
We have one more speaker. Dr. Jason Wirth is a professor of philosophy at Seattle University. His most recent book is Nietzsche and Other Buddhas from Indiana University. He's also the author of Mountains, Rivers, and the Great Earth, reading Gary Snyder and Dogen in an age of ecological crisis and other scholarly works. He was ordained in 2010 in Japan as a priest of the Soto Zen lineage, and he's founder and co-director of the Seattle University Ecosystem. And right now,
when Courtney and I and Shin were talking about Courtney's presentation this morning, she was very recalcitrant and said, well, I'm not sure it would fit. I'm not sure I could do it. And of course, we wanted to give her space for that. But I would say from a Zen perspective, we should do it. So I have just some small Zen seeds I would just like to just scatter into the soil in a really unsystematic way. Not arbitrary, but in a systematic way. And I just begin by, people ask you all the time, do you have a Zen practice? What is it? Is it a philosophy? Is it a religion? As if knowing that will somehow deepen the practice. And lots of reasons why you might not want to call it a religion. One of the most obvious is Zen is also a deep commitment and practice of honesty. And maybe that's at the heart of all religions, if we're honest about what they were. It's very hard to find that in a lot of religions in terms of their actual history and practice. I think of the 10th painting of the Oxherding pictures. No tricks, no magic, no spells, just teach the withered trees to bloom. Zen really is a belief that truth can be just as it is, deeply spiritual. No place extra, no extra foam, as Dogen likes to say, no So my scattered little Zen seeds today, what does it mean to speak of Sam Hamill and Zen? That's a hard question in many, many ways. I would say, one way you might want to say is it to evaluate the extent and success of his practice? I think maybe that's not the most interesting way to think about it. Hamill was first introduced to Zen, also legend has it, when he was 20 years old and stationed in Okinawa, Japan, where he met his first Zen people, and also where he became a pacifist and was honorably discharged. Another awakening moment for him was his discovery of Gary Snyder, who had a very systematic Zen practice, so 10 years of Rinzai training in Kyoto. I'm sure most of you know, he built a Zen nook right next to his house, with his own hand, a ring of bone, a little Welsh poem. In 1981, in the collection of essays, At Home in the World, the old Jawbone Press title, Hamill finds himself defending Gary Snyder from the curmudgeonly academic police. Believe you me, as an academic, I know these people too well. Like they're career prosecutors. They're trying to help us out. They attack. There is no poet more original, none with a quicker and more disciplined mind, none saner, none with a depth of perception approaching his. Then the poem Lies of a Poet, a letter to Gary Snyder. Hamill writes of when Kenneth Rexroth first introduced him to Snyder's poems. I was just a kid with a heroin habit and a talent for self-destruction. Your poems returned me to sanity. First of all, I would say, that's a good way to start your Zen practice. Not, wow, I'm so good, I'm beyond capitalism, and I have the best ecology around, and, all these idiots here don't know the great spiritual wisdom that I have. It's because you're not going to have a very fruitful Zen practice if that's your start. Start in hell. And I would say Sam gives us that as part of the deep koan. He started his Zen practice in hell. In a prolegomena essay, however, initially, he first distances himself from Snyder ever so slightly. He said in 1981, the line was, Snyder's a Buddhist. I'm a Confucian Taoist. They've been at odds for a couple thousand years or so. Yet, he struggled.
It's a small one.
Yes, a small one. Ian Hamill later says in his poem to Snyder, you have given us Stone Age economics and the idea of practice, Buddhist and or poetic. That and or is also one. We should not underestimate how important that phrase is. You have given me a model for my practice, not something merely to imitate, but a wise counsel culled from the ages. Call it what you will, characterize its procedures how they will. At least it is. Hamill had practice. All of his work was a practice, as Courtney said. In Zen, I think really, after a few years, you realize we're as good as our practice. We practice the best we can. But since that practice includes honesty, none of us ever imagined that it was good enough. As he said of Snyder in a review of No Nature in the Buddhist periodical Tricycle, Snyder's teaching is centered in the poet's sense of mindfulness, of being aware of the consequences of one's actions. The poet knows exactly what he is doing here, and he knows it from the long view rather than from the typically self-conscious, self-centered perspective of most of his contemporaries. And poetry is indeed a practice of mindfulness, not the cheap psychological version in which we return to the mad banality of routinized life as the economic, political, and ecological crises rage about us. Pacification. Mindfulness is pacification, which a lot of that these days. But a deep and revolutionary attentiveness that endeavors to tear through the veils of ideology. Hamill continued, as perhaps the most articulate spokesperson for Zen, he, Snyder, has always stressed practice, locating the interstices of the civilized and the wild within the mind, bringing into practice a fundamentally Buddhist spiritual ecology that in turn tends more towards the inclusive than the exclusive. I think Sam strove towards that. But we should remember, and this cannot be stressed enough, a practice is a struggle with the forces within and without oneself. I think really this poem, True Peace, 2012 poem, I won't read the whole thing, but there I think you really see some of this struggle. Really beyond the kind of guru phrase of Zen, in which we thought that there was these perfect individuals who were just better than us and maybe we one day could just transcend our humanity rather than practicing hell. Half broken on that smoky night, hunched over sake in a serviceman's dive somewhere in Okinawa nearly 50 years ago, I read of the Saigon Buddhist monks who stopped the traffic on a downtown thoroughfare so their master, Taekwondo, could take up a lotus position in the middle of the street. And they baptized him there with gas and kerosene, and he struck a match and burst into flame. That was June 1963. I was 20, a U.S. Marine. He goes on, you all know this poem, I'll read the whole thing. But he asked, how did he do it? Well, he was truly at peace. Sam concludes, what is true peace? I cannot know. 100 wars have come and gone as I've grown old. I bear their burdens in my bones. Mine is the heart that burns today, mine is the thirst, the hunger in the soul. Old master, old teacher, what is it that I've learned? And so I think this morning we can ask ourselves, as another one of our Zen koans for today, what is it that we learned? What is it that Sam taught us? The advantage of calling that a koan, not only does it invite the obvious paradoxes that are the paradoxes between Sam's work and Sam the person, the paradox within Sam the person, the paradox within Sam's work. But koans, they'll undo us and make us more honest. Confront things, it's easy to say, and I love saying it to everyone, I'm committed to everyone in this room, Confucius was right, first we rectify the names. That's really, really hard. Very hard. That's a call. The Lotus opt for the figure of true peace. I think Sam sensed that probably was wishful thinking. The Lotus Sutra is a very beautiful phrase that I hold on to often, because I think I find it very liberating in terms of really being honest about our practice. Practice that's the and or also of poetry. And Zen's love of poetry and poetry's love of Zen. The Dharma reign falls equally on all. We're all falling. There's one world. We're all of it. It excludes no one. But we each receive it in our own way. The rock receives what the rock receives. It makes no sense to say to the rock, why aren't you the earth? Why aren't you absorbing all the water? It makes no sense to say to an ant, why aren't you me? Or to say to yourself, why aren't you a tiger? Or to say to the totally divided country, why aren't we each other? That's not how we're going to make peace, by all thinking the same way. Receive the Dharma ring in our own way is also a part of the koan. Sam's life certainly was not always peaceful, but he also was, in all the struggles, someone who certainly fought for peace. As we've already heard, Poets Against the War. In his preface, we agree only in our mutual opposition to an immoral war of American aggression. insurance, wash dinner dishes, and change diapers. Our art and our hearts heavy with reading. As poets, as citizens of this one world. That's our goal. We do all we can, each in their own way, and it was never enough. You know, Snyder has a very beautiful definition of Zen. Give 100%, knowing it makes no difference. Be that person. Sam's heart certainly did burn. Peace was elusive, not only hard to reach, but sometimes hard even to recognize. Yet in Sam you find no flight to peace elsewhere, no magical solutions. Some lines from the 10,000 Sutras after Hamill Meditation Sutra. Open arms and eyes to samsara, embraced by the 1,000 arms of Kanan, the Bodhisattva compassion. Praise our body, even in samsara. Our bodies are the body of the Buddha. Our bodies are the body of Buddha. Now, academically, you can say, of course, that's the teaching of the Nirmanakaya, that everything is the body of the Buddha. But you're not saying everything is something else. You know, don't think about it as what it is. Think about it as the Buddha. No. Everything, by virtue of being what it is the body of the Buddha. That's how it is the body of the Buddha. It's not magically the body of the Buddha. To let things be what they are is the Nirmanakaya. Just as they are. But that's a hard thing. So part of how they are is they're not just what they are all by themselves. But if you imagine that is then to say, well, then everything is Buddha, therefore nothing to anything in particular, regardless of that is to grab the snake of emptiness by the head, or to miscast a spell. Free you up more complexly for what things are. But also, praise our body even in samsara. The teaching wasn't, honestly, look along the Lotus Sutra, escape samsara, there's no better place to go, call it nirvana. Lotus Sutra, that's a teaching for the dull mind. That's the emergency teaching. That's the jaws of life, saving you from the car wreck of your life. That's just a lie. We hope that it'll lead to something good someday. But it's a terrible teaching. Samsara is not really to understand the koan and liberation and preciousness, the one bright pearl that is samsara. Samsara is that we experience samsara samsarically, not as our one pearl. And to experience samsara non-samsarically, to make space for it, to strive to be more. Hanan, I adore you, I love you completely. Nothing to ask in return. Each act of affection a lesson. I failed. Every honest person. You know, you can't say that every morning. I failed. But with each failure, learn like studying under Teishan. 30 blows if I can't answer. 30 blows if I can. That's honest. You know, we all know people who awaken one day in their lives and say, man, I've just been a piece of shit my whole life. I got to just do something for others. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you're that person now. It's a good improvement. I celebrate it. I want to encourage it. But what are you going to do? I thought all you had to do was want to do something. Yeah, now welcome to the honest part. Welcome to the honest part. Honesty, at least when we write, let's start there. Some of the poets. You know, a practice, not perfection, not answers for all people at all times. Sam's got a little line in what the water knows. It's one of my own poems. A rat's as moral as a monk in the eyes of the real world. Take that one to the Zen bank. You know, when Courtney, my really beloved, truly awesome former student, I met Sam only one time through Courtney. Brought Sam to my Buddhist philosophy class. So I had a correspondence with Sam. And Sam asked for my
the effort to be both honest while honoring the gratitude and love that you may feel for the teacher that lives within you. The questions that I have, I wanted to try to actually center your experience a bit. And so we can open up to questions from the audience, and I have a couple of questions as well. But one thing that I wanted to ask both of you is that giving things their right name, this sort of idea is an idea of developing discriminating awareness to be able to see clearly. So in entering into a mentoring relationship with Sam, I would love to hear you speak on what you felt that you had to learn to rebel against or resist.
I feel like we should just hold hands and speak together. One thing that I remember, tell me if this is correct, do I remember it correctly? That I don't remember a time when I was not rebelling against Sam. He gave me these books to read, and I read these books, and they were sexist, and they didn't make sense, and I had problems with them, and parts of them were brilliant. And so from the very first conversation with him, I was, yeah, but what about this? And how do you justify this? And how do we explain this part? And I, maybe because of the very first experience, my first experience of him, was of him being at a very, it's a lovely poetry event, and people were behaving in what I have come to learn is a more kind of typical way of behaving in a poetry event, and Sam did not. And so I don't ever remember not rebelling against him. Is that jive in here?
I think I had to discover that I was rebelling when I didn't realize I was yet rebelling. I mean, the simplest way I think I can put it is that very early on, going to see Sam at Carving Island, mentioned that poetry is a big house. There's room for many people. And he mentioned a poet that has been very important to me, and he said, yeah, not so important to me. And I took that at face value to a certain degree. It took much longer for me to realize and to really say yes to how my own sense of what my practice as a poet and as a person is about overlapped with Sam's and diverged from Sam's. And so for me, there was really a process of growing into a greater clarity of Sam and I share Hayden Carruth, W.S. Merwin, Levertov. But there are other poets that are extremely important to Sam for whom they don't speak to me. And that's okay. I spent a lot of time thinking, well, why don't they speak to me? I must not be reading these books properly. And I had to dare to say, well, I have to follow my own path, which overlaps with Sam's, but is not Sam's. That was part of my own rebellion into my own honesty about what spoke and speaks to me.
So one of the things that I was very touched by both of your talks, I think a quality of embodying certain Zen qualities is present in both of your characters, from the sense of humility or the absence of ego, the open heart and mind, and the desire to serve or to help. You talked about mowing the lawn and thinking of the dog poop and prepping his archives and being his companion and going through unnecessary trauma and just doing what needs to be done, this desire to help. And I would love to hear what you would identify or name as the teachings that you've taken with you into your own spiritual practice.
I would say the practice of courage, in its radical, deep-root sense of being of the heart. Corazón in Spanish. Courage gives ear the root. You listen. Forward. Having the courage to be honest with myself. having the courage to show up as myself. Maybe not as the student or acolyte I might have presented myself early on. Two things, two more things that occurred to me. One, I really appreciated you mentioned the connection to Okinawa. My mother's family actually comes from Okinawa, and one of my first meals with Sam was hearing his story of being in Okinawa as a 20-year-old, soon-to-be ex-Marine. And there was a kind of kinship that I, for some reason, forget about, this connection to Okinawa and peace, which somehow connects to my last meal with Sam, where we were having sushi and sake. I think it was his last sushi and sake meal. And I had written a poem for an exhibit at the Vashon Heritage Museum about the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. It was about the history of Japanese Americans on Vashon, 125 years ago. And I'd been asked by the museum to write a poem to invite people into the exhibit existentially, to enter the stories as stories, not merely plaques on the wall. And so I wrote a poem of 5 parts. And I brought that poem with me and I read that to Sam. Which at certain points in my association with Sam would have been terrifying. It was still a little bit nerve-wracking. But there was a shared courage in that moment for me, in offering that poem. And in Sam, I think in that moment we received it, which strengthens my practice.
I think we're both going to be super radical, and I'm going to go with radical honesty. At his best, Sam insisted and delighted in radical honesty. When I asked him if he would come to my Buddhist philosophy class, he was so excited to upset people. He walked onto campus and he said it looks like a prison, and he was fired up. And he came into the class, and it was at Seattle University. He wanted to offend Catholics, he wanted to offend the Buddhists, he wanted to offend everyone. He felt, I think, a part of his task as a present human being, a radically present human being, was to call things by their right names at his best. And so one of the best things that I can imagine to carry forth is that, is to try to be even better than he was at being radically honest.
He didn't upset any students in the class.
He didn't, but
They all were polite, they all koans and crazy wisdom.
So we have a little under 10 minutes. I have one last question, but wanted to open it up to all of you if there's anything that you'd like to ask the panel. Paul.
I think, did you raise your hand? How do you practice poetry? Maybe according to Sam. And especially when you aren't writing poetry.
For me, it was about reading. Always reading. Always reading widely and deeply. It was never absent from our conversations. We talked about the same poems, we talked about new poems, we talked about what we had read and reread and were being newly introduced to. There was never a time when we weren't talking about the poetry we were reading. And it was, those conversations were united with the conversations about our families, whether they were delightful families or horrible families. They were involved in our practice of writing very deeply, but also in our political practices, in our daily lives.
When I met Sam, I stumbled into a practice of poetry through translation, through having lived in South India and encountered poems and encountered poetry really through the Tamil language, which we turned into English as if for the first time. And so as I say this out loud, my practice of poetry and my time in Sam and how they overlap was a practice of translating not just poetry from other languages into English or from English into other languages, but also how we translate the faint tones given off by the heart into our own words, or how I translate Sam's admonitions, suggestions, critiques, or whatever it may be, into my own language, the language of my own heart, which was all along part of the journey.
Courtney, can you talk about the Baldwin quote and kind of what it meant to you?
Yeah.
And I think you have a quote written down.
I have it written down. Paul gave me a gift at one of the memorials for Sam as I was trying to match my own very complex experiences with the experience of this memorial, which I did not find a place for myself within. And I took it like a little present. And this morning, as I was preparing, it was the last thing I thought I needed to have with me. Paul said, "Do you know what Baldwin said about sentimentality?" And I said, "Baldwin is one of my dudes, and I have no idea what he said about sentimentality. I can't believe this." He said, "Let me look it up." And he looked it up on his phone, and here's what Baldwin said about sentimentality. Sentimentality, the ostentatious parading of excessive and spurious emotion, is the mark of dishonesty. The wet eyes of the sentimentalist betray his aversion to experience, his fear of life, his arid heart, and it is always, therefore, the signal of secret and violent inhumanity, the mark of cruelty. And I have spent some time talking about Sam at his best, and I would say Sam at his worst was deeply sentimental. And so when you offered this to me, it felt like an important clarification, an important way to state things plainly. Yes?
I've been a caregiver for an elderly philosophy professor, and he passed last week. And my care for him was always a dance between loving his mind and his creativity and him wanting me sexually. And he always respected the boundaries. And I'm grateful that he wanted me in body and mind and was able to separate that. And I was able to separate that. But that dance was there for the 4 years I worked with him. I'm wondering how you, after Argentina, separated being his caregiver. How did you separate? How did you go on with your relationship with him after feeling what you had felt in Argentina?
I tried to talk to him about it, and he didn't want to talk about it, and so our relationship ended.
You just had to split it off.
Yeah. It was horrendous. I think that's the best way to describe it. It was jarring and awful. And that was the way that I could continue to have what you're describing, that feeling of both. I don't know that I could have been here today or had that feeling of both had
But it sounds like now you have, well, you
Oh man, I'm working.
have respect.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I suspect that will be a work in progress for quite a while. Yeah.
But it sounds like a piece, it sounds like you've got it figured out.
Thank you. I'm going to carry that with me and make it a part of my work.
So we're winding down. My last question, and this is a first thought, best thought kind of thing. I firmly believe that all needs are teachers and that our students can surpass their teachers, basically. And so my question for you is, what is the koan that you would offer to sing?
Jesus.
First thought, best thought.
Jesus.
I guess that's I'll go with that.
Maybe that's it.
Yes. And keep on listening. Sam.
Jason, do you have any closing thoughts? Words?
I mean, offer one koan, another one. If I were to talk to Sam after this morning, I would ask him koanically, not expecting an answer, but really trying to plant a seed. What would it have been to be truly grateful for your own life?
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamilton. Thank you.
How do you go on after I'm really grateful for this panel and for the depth of intimacy and the honesty of it. I think a lot of people were waiting to hear what you said, and I'm glad you said in this kind of forum. And, the good news about Sam is that he always surrounded himself with really intelligent, really capable people. The bad news is he surrounded himself with intelligent people. So thank you all for your contribution. That was amazing. Can we give one another hand?